All right, let's just jump right into it. When we think about the architects of modern pop, hip hop, and electronic music, our minds usually go straight to flashy superstars, right? Massive egos, larger than life cultural icons. But today, we're looking at a completely different kind of pioneer. We're talking about four guys from Dusseldorf, Germany, dressed impeccably in suits and ties, standing almost completely motionless behind a bank of synthesizers. Obviously, we are talking about Kraftwerk. In this explainer, we're going to unpack how this incredibly enigmatic group completely rewired the global cultural landscape, and how their sheer obsession with synthetic sound actually went on to rewrite the fundamental rules of modern European copyright law. Now take a look at this quote. What the Beatles are to rock music, Kraftwerk is to electronic dance music. I mean, to be compared to the Beatles is pretty much the ultimate musical compliment, right? But as New York Times critic Neil Strauss pointed out back in 1997, for Kraftwerk, it might honestly be an understatement. Because the Beatles revolutionized a genre that was already there. Kraftwerk, they basically had to invent the instruments, the aesthetic, and the entire sonic foundation of electronic dance music from scratch. They weren't just playing a new style, they engineered a whole new paradigm for how sound could even be put together. And just in case you're sitting there thinking there's some obscure historical footnote just for the music nerds, look at this slide. This is a massive, undeniable footprint across the biggest names in pop and hip-hop. Madonna, Missy Elliott, they all borrowed heavily from the Kraftwerk playbook. Jay-Z sampled them directly for his 97 track Sunshine. Coldplay took a classic Kraftwerk synth melody and turned it into a stadium-shaking rock riff for their hit Talk. But honestly, the real game changer was Afrika Bambaatan's Planet Rock. By fusing Kraftwerk's robotic European beats with Bronx breakdancing culture, they inadvertently laid the groundwork for hip-hop, not to mention sparking the entirely new mechanical genre of Detroit techno. But here's the really wild part. Despite having this absolute global dominance, they actively hated fame. The Guardian hit the nail on the head when they called them the assassins of the cult of personality. In an era where you had Mick Jagger strutting around and David Bowie doing his theatrical personas, Kraftwerk was the total antithesis of a rock star. No prancing around, no tabloid gossip, zero ego. They stayed utterly anonymous. In fact, for some live shows, they'd literally just swap themselves out with physical robots on stage. Which, let's be real, is the ultimate flex for a band actively dodging the spotlight while totally changing the music you listen to every single day. Okay, let's move backward in time a bit to Section 1, inside Kling Klang Studio. To really understand how they built this futuristic sound, we have to look at their secretive laboratory in Dusseldorf. This was their sanctuary. Outside contact was a strict no-go. And as you can see, it started out as this tiny 60-square-foot room tucked in an industrial courtyard with just some basic stereo tape machines. But here's the thing. The commercial synthesizers they wanted literally didn't exist yet. So they didn't just play instruments, they had to invent them. They were in there soldering their own custom drum machines. Eventually, they spent 3 years painstakingly designing these highly portable 19-inch equipment frames. That meant they could pack up this entire complex studio, throw it on a plane, and perfectly recreate that clinical, pristine sound anywhere in the world. It's kind of like, imagine your favorite chaotic rock band putting on a tie and clocking in for a 9 to 5. That was Kraftwerk. They didn't see themselves as these untouchable rock gods. They called themselves musical workers. They were regularly clocking in for 8 to 10-hour days to meticulously design every single aspect of their art. They operated way more like a factory than a band. They kept every piece of old equipment in the basement just so they could recreate hyper-specific sounds decades later. They designed their own lighting, built custom PA systems, and self-produced everything just to keep total, uncompromising creative control. Moving right along, let's dive into Section 2, the transnational music exchange. So how did these stiff, serious guys in suits make music that made the whole world want to dance? Well, in the post-war era, you had a lot of white rock bands like the Rolling Stones or Led Zeppelin adopting a white face, black voice model, heavily imitating Black American blues artists. Kraftwerk looked at that and said, nope. They felt that wasn't authentic to their European experience. Instead, they ran their vocals through synthesizers to create this emotionless, completely deracialized electronic voice. But crucially, and this is the genius part, while the vocals were icy and European, the rhythms were deeply inspired by funky, highly syncopated Black American soul. Basically, they swapped out the blues for pure groove. And you can see exactly how this played out right here on this chart. It's this fascinating circular flow of influence. Kraftwerk was pulling heavy inspiration from Black American funk icons like James Brown. They even admitted they were huge Motown fans, explicitly trying to pair an American rhythm feel with stark European harmony. And then, this transnational exchange flowed right back across the Atlantic. Those rigid but incredibly funky beats inspired Black American DJs in places like Detroit, who took that synthesized sound and used it as the foundation to invent Detroit techno. It is just this perfect, continuous loop of cross-cultural innovation.
It was so authentic that it actually led to this amazing moment in the studio. In 1978, Kraftwerk brought in a legendary Black American sound engineer from LA named Leonard Colonel Disco Jackson to help mix their album The Man Machine. He heard the backing tracks and immediately assumed he was listening to a black band. That's how deeply they understood the groove. Even though it's just four German guys playing rigid keyboards and synthesized drum pads, the soul of that rhythm was just undeniable.
All right, let's move into Section 3, the man-machine aesthetic. Kraftwerk wasn't just about pioneering sounds. The whole public identity was a massive engineered project. Just look at this quote from founder Ralph Hutter. "We are the children of Fritz Lang and Werner von Braun. Our reality is an electronic reality." They were completely ditching the denim and leather of American rock for a uniquely German industrial aesthetic, and this was super intentional. They were trying to build a modern German identity out of the cultural void left after World War II. They didn't look to the past. They were obsessed with machines, the Autobahn, and the sheer potential of the future.
And honestly, the electronic reality they were singing about back then is quite literally the world you and I live in today. They were so prophetic, it's almost scary. In 1981, they dropped Computer Love, a song about staring at screens to find human connection, way before the internet, Tinder, or online dating were even a thing. They used their synths to mimic everyday urban noise, like traffic. Radioactivity nailed both the utopian promise and the terrifying nuclear dread of modern tech. They even pictured a borderless, connected continent in Europe endless. They literally saw the 21st century coming, and they decided to write the soundtrack for it.
Which leads us perfectly into Section 4, shaping modern copyright law.
Because, when you invent the exact electronic sounds that everyone else in the world suddenly wants to use, you're probably going to end up in court. And we are talking about a staggering 30-year legal war over a 2-second drum loop. It started when hip-hop producer Moses Pelham grabbed a tiny, heavily modified metallic beat from Kraftwerk's 1977 track Metall auf Metall, looped it, and used it for Sabrina Settler's 1997 track Nur Mir. Kraftwerk, being fiercely protective of their sounds, sued. And for decades, this case just bounced around the German legal system, winning, losing on appeal over and over, until it landed in front of the highest authority, the Court of Justice of the European Union.
To settle this massive clash between modern sampling culture and strict legacy copyright, the EU's top court actually had to legally define the concept of pastiche. Thanks to this whole saga, the law officially shifted 2021 to include a pastiche defense. The court said, basically, you can sample without permission if your work evokes the original but stays notably different from it. It has to engage in an artistic or creative dialogue. So whether that's a heartfelt tribute, a satire, or the foundation of a brand new hip-hop track, it's protected.
But hold on, because this immediately opened up a huge can of worms for the global music industry. Does the artist actually have to intend to make a pastiche for it to be legal? Think about it. If you're a bedroom producer and you just grab a Kraftwerk beat because it sounds cool, are you genuinely engaging in a high-minded artistic dialogue, or are you just lazily lifting someone else's hard work? Well, the court dropped this absolute bombshell of a ruling. Intent absolutely does not matter. The judges decided that as long as someone listening can recognize the artistic engagement, as long as the audience hears the pastiche, it is 100% legal. You don't have to prove you meant to do it. This was a massive win for electronic and hip-hop producers across Europe, giving them huge legal clarity. And it definitively proved that Kraftwerk's influence isn't just in the music we hear, it is literally hard-coded into the laws that govern how modern music is made. So as we wrap up this explainer, I really want to leave you with this thought. It's the ultimate irony of Kraftwerk. You have a group of deeply private guys in suits, hiding behind custom-built oscillators, who somehow managed to birth global dance music, connect continents, and permanently rewrite European law. They stripped away all the ego, the personality, all the typical rock star nonsense to act like calculating machines. But in doing so, they accidentally created the very heartbeat of modern human culture. So next time you hear a massive hip-hop beat or a techno track, you really have to ask yourself, are we all just living in Kraftwerk's electronic reality?